Hey everybody, welcome back to Meditation for Normal People. Today I'm going to talk about belief and how that affects your actions. Some friends of mine were discussing a really interesting thought experiment with me. And in it, you're in a forest. You're in a forest alone, and you have one of two options. You can believe that you can get out, or you can believe that you can't. And if you believe you can't, then you give up and ultimately you die. And if you believe you can, you put some effort into finding your way out, and eventually you do and you survive. And the moral of the story is that your beliefs govern your actions and your actions reinforce your beliefs. Now, the more I thought about this, the more I didn't agree with this at all. Or I did, but the relationship here I think is very different. So I think experience and action actually happens in layers, and belief is only the top layer. So your thought and your reaction to everything around you and how you project that out into the world, and then what you do, all of this kind of combines in your conscious thought. You make decisions about how everything works and how you want to act and work, and those become your beliefs, and most people make decisions based on those beliefs. So below the beliefs are your thoughts and your awareness. So that's how you're perceiving things around you. It's purely your awareness of environment, and also the unconscious thoughts and emotions that are coming up from beneath. And they combine what you're feeling and what you're thinking and what's around you, and that becomes your sense of self. And you identify with that sense of self. You project from your sense of self outwards, and the sense of self bubbles up and becomes your beliefs. So below that, you have unconscious thought and you have emotion. Now, there's actually quite a bit of data out there, studies that show that the decisions you make are actually unconscious, and you make those decisions before you're aware of it. So by the time you make a decision, you're actually telling yourself a story about being aware of what you're doing and doing something, but actually you've already made that decision. It's freaky, but it's worth looking up. And then emotions are kind of a visceral version of that. You have fear coming up, or happiness, or whatever it is, and by the time it gets to your conscious thought, it becomes again your sense of self and identity, and how you feel and how you react to those emotions. Now, when you meditate, or when you're in a state of mindfulness, the way that you experience the thoughts bubbling up and the emotions coming to the surface is quite different. You experience these things that are arising as objects in your awareness, just like a sound or your breath or temperature, a physical sensation. The thoughts and feelings become no different. They're simply objects in your awareness. And because of that, your sense of self starts to soften, because you become less and less identified with these thoughts and feelings, and you become more and more aware of what's in your awareness, but you're not identifying with a sense of looking outward. You're starting to become the experience itself, and the choices you make and what you do are less and less a function of how you're thinking about yourself, and more about how you're simply experiencing that. So in the forest analogy, if you're in a high state of mindfulness, then as you're experiencing, might be cold, you might be uncomfortable, you might be hearing sounds, you might feel the ground under your feet, and you might feel fear coming up, or a sense of determination coming up, but you're observing these things as objects, just like the sounds and the temperatures and everything else. So you're not grasping one way or the other. You're simply experiencing. Now, here's the thing. Because the thoughts and the emotions are coming up on their own, and your experience is feeding downward, you actually require very little thought and no belief at all to make the decision. You already know, before you even think about it, that you need to walk out of the forest and find your way out. And because you're experiencing the fear as an object and not your identity, your sense of self, You're not afraid to do it. You're not terrified of not doing it. You're not paralyzed and stay there and die. You're probably also not getting super excited about finding your way out. You're just reacting. It becomes part of the experience just like anything else. And when you make a decision, whether it's something dramatic in the forest or whether you're just walking around, the impulse, the experience of wanting to do one thing or the other, again, becomes very subtle. You start to think less and less about it. And as a result, things become very vivid because you're not projecting outward. You experience everything in a type of choiceless awareness. So in day-to-day terms, what can happen physically or what can happen experientially is, I'll give you an example. So let's say I'm in a train station. I'm waiting for a train, and I'm looking around, and I remember, I can be mindful, and suddenly your view becomes almost panoramic because you're not choosing to look at one thing or another. You begin to see everything almost all at once. And the colors and the crispness become much more vivid, much clearer, because you experience everything directly. You're not making decisions, you're not reacting to it, it's just all around you. And when the train comes, you don't think about, I need to get on the train. You find yourself getting on the train. And when you're walking down the street, you can even have a sense of, instead of looking at people and walking somewhere, you start to feel like the people are actually moving towards you instead of you moving towards the people. And what you're seeing is just there. It's not you looking outward. So one last thing, the sense of Buddhist philosophy or the model of the mind also has some interesting things to say about this. So this doesn't have anything particularly to do with anything metaphysical or religious, but what's interesting is that with Vipassana, Dzogchen, typically the foundations of mindfulness practice, what the ultimate goal of these is actually to get to a point where the mind becomes an illusion. You start to recognize the sense of subject-object looking outwards as an object of awareness, just like an emotion or just like a sound or just like a color. And you experience everything directly. And they talk about emptiness. Now, this is a word that translates very badly into English because it has negative connotations in English and in the West. But the emptiness is actually the choiceless awareness, the type of spacious awareness that you begin to feel when that sense of self begins to dissolve and that sense of subject-object begins to dissolve. And I can tell you there's nothing negative about it. I get glimpses of it. Most people get glimpses of it as they meditate. Sometimes people stabilize and they're in that state completely. But that sense of emptiness is kind of where you want to get to. And you don't stop being yourself, but you become very open to other people. Your relationships improve. And of course you get all the corollary effects like better sleep and more relaxed and all those things that the West promises with meditation. You get that anyway. It kind of bubbles up. But that emptiness, some teachers claim that that emptiness has a quality in itself. Some people say it's love. Some people say it's just kind of a equanimity with the world. But whatever you call it, again, it doesn't have anything to do with spirituality, but it does seem to reinforce the idea that the beliefs above it are actually much less important than the experience of everything around you and how much that sense of self is grasping or pulling away, and how much you relate or how you relate to what's coming up into that awareness. All right, well, that's the goal of meditation and Vipassana and Dzogchen, and getting a good look at the train station and getting out of the forest. So I hope you enjoyed that. And I'll see you at the next meditation for normal people.